what happened in my brain to change my worldview when I changed what I put in my mouth?
So our brain and our body are actually a little bit like an antenna or a really beautiful functioning, I'll say both piece of equipment, but also a divine and holy temple. And so I liken it to if you have a really high performance sports car and you decide to put the cheapest kind of gasoline and the worst kind of motor oil in it, that's people eating standard processed food diet. And then they wonder why they ping because actually they've been taught that it's normal to have all kinds of mechanical errors and not feel good. And brain fog's normal. You just need another energy drink or whatever they're selling at the convenience mart to get through it. What I hear you did was step out of the paradigm of the sick and the broken and into a paradigm of self-regulation and control. And what I could speculate might have happened in your brain as a result is probably the overall power came up. What we don't realize is that when we take in poison into our body or when we don't sleep enough, we don't have enough mitochondrial function to do the things. So imagine if you're supposed to have, let's say, 15 watts of power, but you only have 13 watts of power. How well are you going to run the equipment of the brain? Because it's working with electrical energy. If you don't have enough power to run the functions, a lot of the functions are going to get shut down. And those functions might be knowing how to connect with your wife, being able to be empathic, being able to be strategic as a businessman. Right? Because it's going to default into survival strategies. And so what I hear you did was probably provide better power and reduce the toxic burden, both of which is going to make your whole brain work better. And in addition, you probably had a big reframe about who you thought you are.
Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Beitz. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. My guest today is Dr. Amy Albright, a trailblazer in human potential who bridges business strategy, neuroscience, health, and spirituality. She's known for helping leaders tap into higher levels of clarity, alignment, and performance by integrating cognitive, emotional, physical, and spiritual intelligence. Dr. Amy is the CEO and co-founder of Holon, where she and Dr. Drew Pearson have developed pioneering programs that blend advanced neurofeedback with deep personal and spiritual development. Their work uses cutting-edge, technology-assisted brain training to help people unlock rapid growth, resilience, and greater alignment with their purpose. Dr. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Doug. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, I am too. It's been about 4 months since we last spoke to start to set this up, and I've really been looking forward to it, listening to you a lot since then. So I'm probably going to start off with a little bit of an unusual question for you, for the topic you're normally on. The podcast is targeted at men. So 9 out of 10 of my guests are men. So today we're blessed with a different angle. So I'm curious, from a female point of view, how do women want men to act around topics like intuition, etc.?
Wow, that is an unusual question. I love this question. First off, I want to just say I'm honored to be on a podcast that mostly men are listening to because I adore and love men so much. And I know I said this to you, but I want the audience to know it as well. There was a period of time where 9.5 out of 10 of my clients were men. I mean, probably almost for 10 years. And I really, really enjoy working with men. And I feel like I connect deeply to what it is to be a man, although I'm definitely, I'm an outside observer looking in, right? But I feel it deeply in my heart. So as I say that, what I would say that women want for men to know, maybe this isn't exactly for your audience, but just, I think the main thing is to stay really open, right? Like not to go into any judgment or trying to say something is or isn't so, but rather just be in a state of feeling. And I think that in general, women want more feeling from men, just being present, not fixing things, more, just being there. Than many men realize. So I think just feeling into what's possible or what's true. And because I think that, when we look at the brain, men have less of a corpus callosum. Do you mind if I just jump in on brain right
Yeah,
away?
no, go for that.
Okay.
Yeah, and just explain the corpus callosum a little
I
bit
will, for
more.
sure, for
Good.
sure. Yeah, it's big words. It's good stuff, but it's big words. I always make it easy. So, the brain, as we know, is divided into two hemispheres, and there's a connection point between the two hemispheres, right? And that connection point, it's not just one point, it's actually a whole structure. It's like an architecture that connects the hemispheres, and that's called the corpus callosum. And in women, we have a really robust one. And so we are able to do things like multitask better than men, but we're also able to access global information and see multiple points of view more easily, right? So this became part of the function and the fashion because women were the knitter togethers of the hunter and gatherer communities that were thinking about, oh, we've got to pick the berries, we've got to tend to the children, somebody feed that fire, please. And then what is it that we're, making shelters or whatever we're doing? While men, with their lesser connected corpus callosum, were like, I'm going to hunt the deer, hunt the deer, hunt the deer, hunt the deer, bring home the wifey, the deer, feed the family, right? And so there's a more singular focus in the neurology of men. And this isn't a problem unless we make it a problem. Right. So, but for men, they may think that we're talking about one thing when a woman's actually trying to unpack four interrelated things concurrently. But if you listen linearly, it doesn't make sense. Right.
Yeah, I hear all that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so and again, I say this with deep love for men because men can also help women to stay like on track. Right. Let's stay focused on goal number one. Right. I hear everything. And then let's stay focused on what's the first step or just they can create an anchor in a way that sometimes I think women really need. And of course right now I'm speaking to generalizations of based on kind of like how we have gender assignments, but there's always the different guy and the different gal within the spectrum of humans out there. But I think it's so interesting and really relevant to be able to relate it kind of as I do everything in life to the brain and how the brain is actually structured or functions. Because a lot of the times we take credit or blame for things that are just actually a part of the wiring until we change them, right? Like people stigmatize mental health or differences of ways of processing. And if you look under the hood, it actually is all explained in brain function. And similarly to how if you have a sprained ankle, you're not thinking to yourself, "Oh, I'm a terrible human," and how dare I have this malady, right? You're like, well, it'll heal up and it'll all be fine. And I just take these steps and, do these things and I can get better. But we have that same capacity with the brain as well. So I would say, and thank you for listening, by the way. I know that was a long answer to your question, but there's so much that we can understand in terms of the brain. And there's so much that men and women and really everybody that looks different or thinks there's something different can learn from each other when we drop kind of the stigmas or the boxes that we want to put people into and just look at what's really there and how do we serve each other, how do we love one another, how do we build together.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And you've pretty much answered my second question there because that was about men as well. And yeah, I'm just flipping down here because
Hmm.
we've something that in part of your notes of things to talk about you've got intuition is an evolutionary tool. Why developing intelligence is essential for the next stage of human organizational and evolution. Let's move on to that one.
Yeah, sure. So I really believe that intuition is our evolutionary birthright. Like it's absolutely something that's in our genetics and epigenetics. So, as a piece of background, I studied anthropology quite a bit in my undergraduate degree. And I've always just had this fascination for how have we always lived? Because, I mean, we can probably all agree that we're sort of oddly off balance right now in certain ways as humans. So, I think the secrets for at least some of it would be to look to our past. And how did our ancestors get here? And how did we actually come to exist? Well, our ancestors had to be better than the other people or beings, humanoids that were on the planet at that time, at knowing where food was, at knowing where danger is, right? At knowing how to move if it was a migratory populace, and how to move and where to move, when to move, what's going on with the wind, what's going on with the weather. All of these things are life and death critical factors. And our ancestors are the ones most likely that got that right more often than others. So we've been genetically selected for an intuitive process. But then what happened is we became, in an illusory way, separated from the all that is. We began to believe that God, or the power that runs the whole thing, is outside of us and that we're excluded from it. And we shut down basically that neurological function. And we started to make that be something that is woo, or, kind of like it's not part of our culture, really. It's not part of the indoctrination of modern society.
So when you
So,
say we shut it down, was it when we changed our belief system that we just stopped the strength in there that had us relying on it or just thinking it was normal, that just started to go away and the neurons in that part of the brain underdeveloped and we just forgot about that side of who we were?
yeah, largely that's the case.
Guys, if you're on a path of developing your intuition, and I know you are, that's why you're listening here, then the Neurovisor is a tool worth checking out. It uses light and sound to guide your brain into deeper states of awareness, helping you quiet the noise, tap into your inner knowing, and strengthen your intuitive muscle. And who doesn't want that? There's no pills, no fluff, just 11 minutes a day to reset your mind and reconnect with your instincts. I've bought myself one last Christmas and I've added it to my daily practice, and the shifts are real. This is not a paid ad, but if you use the link in the show notes for more information, I do receive a small percentage of the purchase price. I highly recommend you check it out.
Right? Because if it becomes a sin or dangerous or a threat or not acceptable, or you'll be kicked out of the community or burned at the stake or whatever the story is, it's probably best to not do that behavior. And it just pairs away a lot in the brain. But that doesn't mean that it's not there. It's actually, a lot of it is still there, and it's just in a dormant state. So liken it to when you remove a cast off of a limb after a broken bone. It looks terrible. I mean, it looks like, how will it ever recover itself? But actually it just does, over a course of actually a pretty short period of time. And so similarly, we can redevelop that intuitive capacity, which is helpful for all areas of life, including business. And actually, one of the things that I've noticed in my work is that some of those who have retained the most intuition are actually really, really high-performing business people, because they make their decisions based on spreadsheets and data, and ultimately it's gut. It's always gut. They're feeling and their future forecasting, and they're getting a read on the CEO or the founder, or they're getting a read on what's happening in the greater economic climate, and they're using that. And so I feel like that they just don't use that same language necessarily. They'll say trust your gut, but they don't realize how much there is to that.
Yeah, and I can 100% on that one because in the last 10 years, I've had a situation where I followed some serious synchronicities that were challenging to follow because it was like stepping off a cliff, but the signs were all there that this was it. Like, you have to follow this or your intuitive voice is going to shut down for a while because it's so obvious. But it was like, uh-oh, do I step off the cliff? But when I did step off the cliff, it was really all there. There was nothing to step off to. It was just invisible solidness under me. And this amazing, mind-blowing thing happened and it was business that just generated so much income, and it created such an and the income sounds like it was the wonderful thing, but everything else that happened with it in our lives and our emotions for our whole family just made us all see the world differently. So the money was nice, but it became sort of a small part of the benefit of what's possible in life, etc., and things like that, and how much we're cared for and looked after by invisible forces, and it's just, yeah, it was so, yeah, when you do go with that other sixth sense or whatever it may be, it's so beneficial. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I feel like that is it's a deep testimonial to the same phenomenon that I hear about and that I help to create, that I know you do in your work as well.
Mm.
Because the more that we can encourage ourselves and each other to just be our natural self and to attune to that voice, the more that we can listen for this invisible pathway that we didn't know was there that we can step out onto, or and the beauty of it being so much deeper than whatever we knew to ask for. I think we've become very kind of sadistically oriented only towards money, and because of that, we only see a partial picture. In the way that it works neurologically is that if we only are looking for one thing, we can only find the one thing, right?
Yep. Yep.
If your mom says when you're little, like, go find the Easter eggs in the bushes, you're going to run right past one in the middle of the grass. Like, literally, your foot might land on it and you don't pick it up. You don't get the treasure of the candy or the coins or whatever is inside, right? And so it's because you're so focused on the one thing, and you often do it at the expense of everything else. And so I
Particularly
think
if you're a man, because what you were talking about before, we
exactly
focus on the one thing. And this, my wife, like
yeah.
I've been married over 41 years, and I'm
Mm,
getting better. But what you were talking about before was so pertinent. So yeah, we're definitely. That's why she says
mhm.
you're in your bubble all the time, because I'm just focused on this one thing that's in my bubble with me. And yeah, so the kid running after an Easter egg, look in the bushes. And that's all you would look in, because that's where you were told. Yeah, I get you.
Right. And in the meantime, you're forgetting to have fun. You're forgetting to giggle with your friends. You're forgetting to pick up the treasure that's coming along the way. Um, and this is part of human experience, right? Women are also conditioned in this way, but certainly men are, and men have the extra reinforcement to kind of overcome in that regard because of the structure of most of their brains being a little bit different in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
And
where you go, keep going.
no, the last thing I was going to say is that ultimately there's so much more. The thing that I've seen is that when people open up the aperture of their awareness and they allow for the connection to be there, they not only get clear guidance, but they have so much more fun along the way, and it turns out better than they could have planned.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
So it's
from
the
my
best
personal
plan.
experience of that example I gave you, that's yeah, it's lasting because after that happened, I've got four adult sons, and occasionally they would say to me, after that event, I would be talking about something, and I'd have a bit of doubt or showing a bit of fear towards stepping out to do something. And they go, Dad, after that happened, how can you possibly say this will be too hard? And I'm like, yeah, okay, all right, I get it. Like, it
How
was
could you
sort of,
doubt yourself, right? I love
yes,
it that they're
yeah,
coaching up to dad, right? Like,
they do
we
all the
believe in you,
time.
dad. It's amazing.
Constantly. Well, we've got the
Yeah.
four most amazing sons, and they're all very different. And they coach me and my wife
Mm.
constantly. Like it's
Love
just
it.
they're very polite about it. Two of them live here on the property. We've got acreage, and they're in other, detached
Hmm.
buildings and stuff. And so it's exciting to have them around, and the other two aren't far away, and we see them a lot. And yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, or they're on the phone coaching us through things, and yeah, keeping us
Well,
young.
that's awesome. And I feel like that um, we've been conditioned to think that conforming is courageous. And what I'm hearing that you say and your sons reinforce to you is by not conforming, you're doing the courageous thing,
Yeah,
right? And and it's incredible. And there's so much gift in it. And that we can be supported for doing courageous things that are outside of the norms and believing in ourselves and what it is that we feel called to do. So I'm really grateful that you have that in your ecosystem and that you did
yeah,
follow that and
yeah,
that you're here to share about it. It's amazing.
yeah, yeah. So on that, you've made me think. I'm going ahead a couple of questions here now about who, why we're here, and remembering who we are. Um, you seem to have a deeper understanding than most people I've come across of you may remember a little more of who you were before you came into this incarnation. Do you think you have a strong recognition of who you really are outside of this body? And does that help you do the work you do here?
I think yes and no. I think that definitely a human in a human form, finding her way, right? Or its way as a human. But I also do have a recollection of the before, and I'm very clear on most days what my clear marching orders are and how I'm to conduct myself. And yeah, I think that even before I had the language for it, somebody asked me, "What's your favorite childhood memory?" just earlier today. And I paused and I'm like, probably most people would think of like they unwrapped their favorite toy or they went to Disneyland or something, I don't know, something like that. Mine was when I was sitting quietly listening to the wind as a child, right?
Wow.
And so it's a very different reality. I grew up on land, on 350 acres of land. We didn't own all of that land, but it was around us. And I just would sit and look over this giant valley and listen to the wind. And it was an activity, right? Like I could feel the earth underneath me as I was sitting on the ground. And we had a 4-stall barn and a couple of goats wandering around. And I could feel myself. I could feel earth. I just feel everything. And then soon after that kind of phase of my life, I ended up in suburbia, and I thought I was going to lose my mind because it was so compressed and loud, and I didn't have the ability to hear the same, So
Yeah.
it definitely was in there, but I wouldn't have known how to put words to it because I didn't grow up in an environment or a culture that was nurturing of the world beyond. That happened at about age 18 when I met my grandpa, and he was turns out a spiritual teacher of sorts. So I had met him before, but I didn't really know him, and so we spent time together, and that really changed things for me. He taught me really early on some very important principles that are the foundation of my architecture of reality, my belief structure, what I teach, everything
So
that I've
what did
created.
he teach you?
So many things, but one of them, for instance, was that we are creating our own reality, right? This was 32 years ago. There weren't very many people or even books. There was no internet really. I mean,
Mm.
like nothing like that to reference, right? So, just understanding that we're creating our own reality and that the importance of actually looking at what consciousness is and understanding that our reality is formed based on the lens by which we are able to perceive ourselves, and the importance of health and yeah, so many things. I remember when I used to listen to him, my eyes would a little bit roll back into my head. I couldn't really hold all of it.
Yeah, at 18. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and he wouldn't allow me to take notes. He'd say, "Don't write this down. Put it into your bones." He was very firm. He wasn't. He was sometimes loving, but he was not messing around. It was a bit of a militant training.
Wow. And
Yeah,
was he like this with other grandchildren, or did he was just taking you under his wing?
he attempted it with all of us, but I was the one that really took to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So he had this kind spiritual nature, but with the tough old bugger, like
Yeah,
old school.
it's amazing the dichotomy that can exist inside of one person. Like he was definitely a teacher in the extremes existing inside of each thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, and I had that yesterday with a guy I was talking with, and we'd had over the last few months, we've had a few deep and meaningful conversations. And he's shown me some of his tattoos, and he's got these and I hadn't looked at them, and he had these really, they were all very specific spiritual reasons and everything like that. And I'm like, wow, this guy's really. And then he was telling me about a guy he'd come across who was a psychic, we were having a very deep conversation. And the next thing, he just pulled out the bottle of Coke and just started swinging on it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because for me, I used to swig down a lot of Coke a long time ago, and not
Hmm.
cocaine, Coca-Cola, and
Right, right, right.
and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I thought I judged him for that just then, like pulling out the bottle of
Mm.
Coke, and I thought, Doug, you use. Well, I was a firefighter, and when I was 19, I did my 4-month recruit course, and it was during the peak of summer, and we had to
Mm.
do all our drills and marching and all sorts of stuff on this concrete, you know,
Oh.
thing, and it was just with these 3-story concrete buildings all around, no wind. It was insane. So lunch, and I fortunately lived very close to where we were doing it. So every day I would drive home for lunch and swig down a litre of Coke and lay on the lounge room floor under the ceiling fan because there was no aircon 40 years ago, and So I'm thinking, yeah, I've drunk my fair share of Coke through the years,
Uh-huh,
not judging. But
uh-huh,
yeah, that's what
uh-huh.
to say. People can be very, like you think, wow, they're so advanced in these areas. And because for me, and this is a question I was going to ask you, what was happening in my brain when about 15 years ago, roughly, I radically changed the food that I put into my body
Mhm.
for various reasons. And I, over a period of 2.5 months, I dropped 25 pounds and I didn't even think I was overweight. I actually got quite thin, but I wasn't trying to lose weight. I've put some back on since then, but I stopped basically eating anything that was processed. And I just started eating, the freshest, most locally grown food I could at the time. And within 2 to 3 months, my worldview changed radically. Like I
Mhm.
just saw everything differently. I was more suspicious of some things. I was more open to things, more closed to other things. So just those physical things I put, and I've pretty much have stuck to it 90% through the last 15 years. So
Mhm.
what happened in my brain to change my worldview when I changed what I put in my mouth?
Gosh, it would be hard. I would be a little bit speculating, but I can take a guess, and I'm going to take a step back first, even before I get to that. So, our brain and our body are actually a little bit like an antenna, or a really beautiful functioning, I'll say both piece of equipment in that regard, but also a divine and holy temple, right? Because we're not actually like the computers that we're sitting here talking on. We're made of something different, and our design is obviously different. So when we care for our physical body, we're really attuning and making the antenna work better. And so I liken it to if you have a really high performance sports car and you decide to put the cheapest kind of gasoline and the worst kind of motor oil in it, that's people eating standard processed food diet. And then they wonder why they ping, maybe, because actually they've been taught that it's normal to have all kinds of mechanical errors and not feel good. And brain fog's normal. You just need another energy drink or whatever they're selling at the convenience mart to get through it, right? So what I hear you did was step out of the paradigm of the sick and the broken and into a paradigm of self-regulation and control. And what I could speculate might have happened in your brain as a result is probably the overall power came up. What we don't realize is that when we take in poison into our body or when we don't sleep enough, we don't have enough mitochondrial function to do the things. So imagine if you're supposed to have, let's say, 15 watts of power, but you only have 13 watts of power. How well are you going to run the equipment of the brain, right? Because it's working with electrical energy. So if you don't have enough power to run the functions, a lot of the functions are going to get shut down. And those functions might be knowing how to connect with your wife, right? Being able to be empathic, being able to be strategic as a businessman, right? Because it's going to default into survival strategies. And so what I hear you did was probably provide better power and reduce the toxic burden, both of which is going to make your whole brain work better. And in addition, you probably had a big reframe about who you thought you are, like the importance of you in the world. So maybe some less overthinking of things, maybe not right away, but over time. Because a lot of the times, those insecurities or the feeling of disconnect or the feeling of it doesn't really matter is actually a bit of it's either a loop in communication in the brain, or it's a hot spot, or it's an underperforming area. I mean, that's basically what we can see in the brain and what we can change. So definitely you brought yourself into a whole view, and it changed your capacity to tune and be that antenna that now has different senses of preference. And I think that it's important, the part you were saying too about that you used to drink down a bunch of Coca-Cola and then now you want nothing to do with it. Because people will think to themselves, I don't want that life. I don't want to live like a monk. I don't want to be in denial of things. But what I hear you say as you're saying all of that is, look at what I have. I have so much more abundance in every way. For the choice to not do the processed foods or the Coca-Cola anymore, it's a beautiful reality where you're not feeling in lack and you're not feeling like you're missing the toxic stuff, you're just enjoying yourself so much more in the ways that are surprising. You can't know until you're there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if we did know how much better it was going to make us feel, we would jump on it a lot quicker. Yeah, yeah, and it
Hmm.
just yeah, because I didn't change my diet to change my worldview. That was the last thing I was thinking of. I was just there was reasons for it, and I was 47, and it was very specific because something had happened to someone else who was 47 12
Mm.
years earlier, and now all of a sudden it just hit me like, oh, I'm their age and they were much fitter and healthier and they died
Mm.
because of, different things. And it was like, oh, I'm that age. I best snap out of this and yeah, improve what's going on within me. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
glad you did.
yeah, so am I can tell you. Yeah, it did shake up others in my family.
Yep.
It in a way that they weren't necessarily so on board with my changes initially, and that was challenging, but we got through it. It was just a learning period. I mean, easy for me to say. It was a learning period for all of us
Hmm.
as we
Hmm.
all adjusted to my new way of life and
Hmm.
living.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I, in hindsight, I should have done it differently. I've done it more politer and nicer. But that was all part of, we've all moved on and it's worked. And yeah, yeah, you
And
think,
hopefully it served to inspire others, right? I think that's the other thing is somebody's got to go first, and the way paver doesn't necessarily have a clear path. And they're just doing their best to kind of bushwhack through this reality into another reality. And in the meantime, it can upset other people, but that's leadership, right? I mean, you do your best that you can with it, of course, but ultimately, are you not going to make the right choice because you'll upset someone else's reality? Or are you just going to go ahead and do what needs to happen? And whether they choose to do that or not, or whatever happens for them is their choice ultimately.
yeah,
Um,
and
but
that is a hard one you say because probably 5 years ago, I did some coaching with a lady who does numerology for business. And so she's done a whole big thing over a couple of weeks. But the basics is, Doug, you're a number one in numerology, which is a
oh
leader.
yeah,
You have to lead. And if you don't lead, you will hate your life. Like
that's right.
you have to because that's what you came here to do. And so when you're saying that, and it's like, and bushwhacking through, through the jungle with a machete, and I'm making a path that suits me to get through, and I'm
Uh-huh.
yelling at the others, "Come on, you can get through here too!" And they're like, "No, we can't. You just barely squeeze through that one. We're not following you. We can't see what's on the other side of you. There could be a cliff or like." Yeah, we're not
Yeah.
following that close. Yeah. You
Yeah.
make the path wider, smoother, and, get some paving
Yeah.
blocks and pave it. Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you on that. So next thing I'd like to talk about is is it 5 day live-in that you do you have take three or four people in at a time? Talk us through that. Like say I've just arrived, like I've been, and I know people have to be accepted into your program because
Hmm.
you have such limited numbers that you want to make sure you've got the right people. You don't
Hmm.
take hundreds of people in every week. It's
No.
only a couple. And so I've just arrived, or I mean, I guess there's some pre-work
Hmm.
before you arrive. So, like, talk us through the pre-work once the people arrive. Like, what happens and things like that.
Yeah, sure. I think that this is a great case study because we have so many things that we offer, but this particular offering involves a lot of things. And regardless if anybody ever wants to do this program or not, I think it's an important educational piece for what exists and what is possible. So I'll frame it there first. The program that you're describing is our on-site intensive that's 5 days long. Prior to people showing up, we do a comprehensive health evaluation online and look over, how they're doing from head to toe so we can really know we're going to make a difference in their brain and in their entire being, basically, without any inhibitors. We provide any additional supplements that are needed, and we also get really clear on what is it that's inspiring them to come to our program and what is available to them. So we spend a lot of time online in advance. And then we invite just 3 people at a time. And we only offer this about once a month. This isn't a volume game for us. This is so deep, this offering. And it involves so much from us actually that it would be too exhausting and we wouldn't have fun if we did it more often. And so we just choose to not do it so very often because we love it tremendously just as it is. So we bring 3 people through from a Thursday to a Monday. The first thing we do is we start with an EEG to measure the brain. There's nothing like good hard data. And it's a look under the hood that people typically have never had or have never, I don't know that hardly anybody's ever had one that's been done correctly and read well. My colleague can see inside of an EEG what a lot of neuroscientists can see. So things like ADHD or sleep problems or a propensity towards overthinking or depression or things like that. But what he also can see, and this is something that's unique to him, are places where people are intuitive, where they're tapped in, where they channel, where they have a lot of body intelligence, like a unique amount of body intelligence that helps them to lead intuitive lives via their kinesthetic properties. All kinds of different gifts and capacities are really there, and it's all recorded into the brain. He can even say, you have an unresolved mother wound based on the Brodmann area that is lighting up here. So we take that, and then I also sit with folks. Each of these 3 folks get a deep drop in with me when they first arrive. And between the data and then what they know they want, which of course is limited, right? Because they can only see what they can see from their perspective. And then with that added then to what I can see for them as I look more at the soul level and feel into the subtle possibilities that are just right there, we put together a treatment plan and an approach. And then over the next 3 full days, very, very full days, like 12 hours a day, we do as much neurofeedback therapy and as many of the most elite, let's call them biohacking, just because it's technically a term. I don't like the term, but let's say machine-assisted brain learning and consciousness upgrading equipment, along with a curriculum that helps people to understand what is available. There's a strategic way to step out of one reality into another. This actually goes back to what we were saying before. When somebody's ready for transformation, they don't necessarily want to upset their family, accidentally kill their business and all of their livelihood, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, let's try to do it with as little problems and hiccups and drama and chaos as possible, and also with as much speed and efficiency as possible, because life is short and we should be having a blast and successful in all the ways, like we were talking about earlier as well. So we bring together a curriculum that is multifaceted. Some of it is learned via the brain directly, and some of it is taught verbally. Some of it is experienced in various experiences. And by Monday, we often have such a radical shift in the brain map that the colors are completely different. The data is radically different. And what we know is that data then continues to improve over time. So a lot of the times people think of change as being transient, but because what we do with the neurology is actually learning, the brain has learned a new way to be, we get that immediate state shift, and basically the wires, so to speak, of the brain are just functioning and flowing information differently right away. But what happens over time is that the brain is so loving this new way of being, and the person and their experience of reality is clearly so hugely improved that the brain grows in at about 1 millimeter a month, new neurons or new connections between neurons. And so we actually get a long arc of positive, steady growth for 6, 8, up to 12 months after that on-site. So it's an incredible curriculum. It's an incredible state shift, and people are getting done, often in one day what they didn't think they could do in 10 years. That's a normal thing around here.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got to dumb this down a little bit to my way of thinking to get it.
Okay.
So what you're saying, like the analogy you gave earlier about the car engine putting in the crap fuel and the cheapest oil you could into a racing vehicle. So let's say our brains are racing. It's an electronic device. So are we cleaning all the connections? Are we changing some of the connections? Are we upgrading the size of some of the wiring so that more information can flow through? If that sounds right, how do you do that in such a short time?
There's a lot to it.
Because you're not
One of
physically
the
going in doing
no, there's no surgery.
brain surgery. No, okay. No, good,
Too
good.
messy and not that much fun. A little more
Yeah,
invasive than we like to be.
yeah.
So the basis for a lot of it, not everything that we do, but kind of a lot of the core of what we are doing on a technology level, is going to be neurofeedback therapy. And with that, we put sensors on the outside of the scalp that can actually, they're so sensitive they can read what's going on inside of the brain with a massive amount of specificity. That's the same as what we do to get the original mapping of the brain, the EEG, electroencephalogram. But when we do training, what that means is that EEG is continual. So all of that data is continuously being fed into the computer. And in about 40 milliseconds, the brain is responding to the feedback that the computer is giving it. So it's really a
Well, it's a
fast
two-way
feedback.
thing. So you've got the connections on the top of the head sending
Mhm.
messages to the computer, and the
Mhm.
computer is doing something with that information to improve something and sending it back.
It's actually just giving information to the brain on how it's performing. So, as an example, let's say that somebody is having anxiety and overthinking is something that they would like to be done with. And so their brain is just sort of set on that, right? The wire together, fire together kind of idea. It's what's the default. And it doesn't matter. You can talk yourself through it. You can do whatever kind of breathing or humming or tapping or anything you want. It's just difficult to change that because we're not giving the brain direct feedback. But in this case, what we're doing is the information from the brain is going into the computer. And if the computer is sensing that the person is going into overthinking or anxiety, it doesn't give you the reward, right? And so you don't hear a thing or you don't see a thing on a screen. And if you stop then doing that, if you stop having those anxious thoughts or the overthinking thoughts, then you hear the thing and you see the thing. So let me break this down even one more step further. Imagine you're sitting in a recliner, a lovely leather recliner, with your hands in your lap, and you're playing a video game with your brain. And your ability to perform in the game is not yours under your conscious control. It's actually inside of this dialogue that's continuously happening between your brain and the computer about how to perform at the task at hand. So it could be to stop overthinking or not have anxiety, or it could be to dial up intuition, or it could be to dial up, memory or compassionate and wise leadership traits, things like that. It could be anything that you name. We can pretty much train any aspect of reality, but it's all happening via the dialogue, not between the mind and the computer, but between the brain and the computer, which is a much faster and more precise measure. Does that make better sense?
It does. So you so you're doing the ECG and you're getting the basic of what's in the brain, and then you have a conversation with the client of, well, we're noticing you've got PTSD, you've got
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
mother hang up, all of
Yep.
these things are real. And
Yep.
would you like to work on one of those? And they go, yeah. And so they all want to work on anxiety. So Dr. Drew sets up the program for very specifically for their brain and the anxiety
That's
they're
right.
experiencing. And then they start playing a computer game with their brain that they get they can see on a computer screen when they're got their brain working correctly that
Mm-hmm.
is minus the anxiety.
That's right. And given that there's probably 5 or 10 different ways to get to anxiety, in some neurofeedback, it's very, very basic. It's extremely rudimentary. But with ours, we have the ability to be very specific. So there might be a space the size of a quarter inside of someone's brain that is absolutely going bonkers and just needs to chill out. And so essentially the computer's like, hey, psst, that's enough out of you. Shh, quiet, quiet. And then what happens is all of that power that was prior being really stuck inside of the loops of that thing being overworked, all of again, the wattage of energy actually shifts out. And so then the total being is starting to feel better and they're starting to have other processes come online while they're in the middle of training. So it actually feels really amazing. People are having fun. Like it sounds extremely, and it is honestly extremely technical what we're doing on so many different levels. But the client experience is like they're wandering around with their cup of tea or whatever. And we're like, okay, go sit over there. Like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll go sit over here. And then we stick some wires on their head and they're like, then they do the thing and they're like, wow, there's an altered state that can happen. So I've been describing eyes open, and we also have eyes closed, and often that's very altered. It's almost like they've taken an entheogen, some sort of a plant medicine, because their own neurochemistry is being released and produced in such a way. And it feels so relieving and soothing and deeply healing, right? Like if we have our eyes closed and we're doing a neurofeedback therapy session, what can happen is a massive dropping away of old traumas. And it doesn't have to be that we process them consciously. They're just gone when we look back to see if they're there.
Yeah.
Sometimes if we do process them consciously, it doesn't hurt as much because we've got essentially an anesthetic is being created at the same time as that we're having a remembrance. So it's incredible. It doesn't it's hard to wrap one's mind around, just to be fair. Yeah.
And so say, like you were talking, you quoted some wattage before. Let's say there's 15 watts the brain needs, just make up a figure. And we're wasting 8 of those watts on anxiety. And now we've relieved that and we're not wasting it anymore. So now I've got 8 watts of power flowing through my brain that weren't there before. So now my race car has got this energy that's been constantly wasted for the last
That's right.
62 years. And now I've got this boost of energy and my brain can, all these different things, my brain's now being fed this extra fuel and power and energy. And is that what's giving all these other things of benefits? And like you said, with the closed eyes, it's bringing on, so all these other parts of the brain are now activating. And yeah, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. So you have more power, and then also we just continue to refine how it's being utilized, right? Because some areas may not all by themselves waken up, like little, we'll call them dead zones, right? There's just areas that are underperforming. They may or may not come back online without a little prompt. But as soon as they're prompted and they have enough energy to do so, oh, whoa, it's, oh, that's easy. And so people are having the experience of a massive transformation in a radically short period of time that is so easy that it's ridiculous. And then they go out into their lives and they find themselves to be more easeful about everything because they just have the capacity. It's there. I think that for a lot of peak performers, we've convinced ourselves that we have to whip ourselves and lash ourselves and work harder and be more, push more or whatever. And it's actually the opposite, right? It's like following this. If it's just there, it's easeful. And if it's what we learn is how to live inside of alignment and to listen into those intuitive spaces, whether people care to be intuitive or not, it's a byproduct of our work because they're just not pushing against the steering wheel, trying to go harder, faster, right? Like that doesn't actually move the car.
Yeah.
And so suddenly they know like, oh, this is how the steering wheel thing works. And whether they, like I said, whether they desired to be intuitive as a top line goal or not, it doesn't matter because that's the benefit, that's the impact that not having all of this waste and struggle and strife in life in general creates is more intuition and more joy and more freedom and less reactivity. We hugely get this response of like, yeah, I went home and my significant other was like, okay, this is really weird. You're not getting pissed off about XYZ anymore. You're not being, whatever. And people aren't faking it and it's not temporary. They actually have changed their neurology. And they've also got a belief structure that they're focused on different things that then allows them the strength and the confidence to not fall into that hole that they used to fall into again and again and again in life.
Yeah, I had a older gentleman on I was interviewing last week, and he was budding around for a little while with Buckminster Fuller and Joseph Campbell, and he was talking about some situations with that, and he goes, like he said they used to learn off me all these meditation processes that he had and quieting your mind and stuff. But he said the stuff I learnt off them, he said it was like up to that point, I was sitting in a jet on the tarmac, just sitting with the plane idling, and I thought I was flying. And up to that point in my life, that's all I ever did was just sit on the tarmac in the plane and thought I was flying. And then once these other guys brought all this other information to me, we actually took off. And it was like that was the extreme change in the new knowledge, the new information. Yeah. So a question now, so they're going through, and I'm starting to get what's happening here with those, because if you're an elite athlete, or if you wanted to become an elite athlete and you went for a 5-day thing, but before that you could do the sport, but just. After
Hmm.
5 days, you're not going to be an elite athlete. If you just went, to physical training, how
Oh,
does,
right.
yeah, so, because in 5 days physically, if you went somewhere and you were very, very ordinary before you went there, after 5 days, you're not going to be at, trying out for the Olympics. How do these changes that happen in the brain, how do they stick? How do you not regress back to what you were for the previous 40 or 50 or 60 years? Like is something very serious happening in the brain to stop the regression?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything from triggering BDNF, which is a growth factor in the brain, it's like once that's been triggered deeply enough, it doesn't just untrigger itself, right? There's a growth that's going to happen. We see basically our brain and our entire being loves a better homeostasis, a better set point. And so once it's been shown that, it will strive to create that again and again and again, because it loves that feeling too, which is funny to, personify the brain as separate, but it kind of is in that regard. The body and the mind also really notice how much the energy feels different. The body feels different. The quality of the mind and the way that thoughts are thinking are different. And so there's a reinforcement on all levels that really has somebody want to continue in this way. And so I don't want to say there's zero willpower or zero kind of decision making differences that need to be made on a conscious choice level. That would be a gross overstatement, but it's remarkably less about that, which is part of this whole product of being easeful. Like this entire outcome having so much ease to it is people will say, I no longer desire the substance that I used to be addicted to on a low grade way. Like I just don't even care about it anymore. So it's different than saying, I have to have willpower and grit and, get away from that behavioral pattern. Sometimes, though, people do need to apply a little bit of both. I don't want to say that they don't. But essentially, I mean, if you're in the right environment, the brain can learn faster than the muscles. The brain is like, it's really fast. And ultimately the muscles, to go back to the athlete idea, if you train the brain correctly, the athlete actually can learn much faster. And so where I thought you were going with the question, which I'll just kind of touch on for a moment, is when people are athletes or let's say they're musicians, we've had guitarists make incredible strides in their ability to move their fingers, the dexterity. My colleague used to work on professional athletes for a period of time, or fighter pilots, because they had more accuracy and just better performance overall, less fatigue, more ability to do whatever they were doing before. So it's incredible in that regard. And I think we also send them home with a huge amount of strategy about how to approach their life, their relationships, how to set up their day for success, and find that people just have an ability to stick with those programs and ideas that maybe in the past felt kind of overwhelming. But again, they have more capacity that's been freed up. So now it feels easeful and brings them immediate joy rather than feeling like, oh, maybe if I, we to go to your point of the jet not getting off the tarmac, we've had people come in and they're like, well, I've meditated every day for 5 years and my diet is this and, whatever. And kind of the question might be like, well, could you still help me? Or what does this give more? And then what they realize as soon as they get here and they do their first eyes closed state of training is they're like, I've actually never meditated before. I've sat there with my eyes closed, but what I did was actually just quiet my mind, and I didn't know that I could do that. Right. And so the brain learns that new way of being very deeply, and it's a beautiful, it's that all by itself is a beautiful life change, even if the other changes didn't happen.
Yeah. So there I'll loosely use the term learning a new skill. But
Hmm.
when you're talking before about like the new skill of really meditating for real, but when you're talking before about like addictions falling away, and I've got to dumb it down to my level, is it that like, the addiction and whatever it was in our physiology or our brain, like had a magnetic attraction, and now that the electromagnet has lost its steam and it's let it go and it's not there anymore and they don't connect and they're not attracted to each other anymore. Is it something like that?
I love that question. And it actually feels like a bigger question than I even know the answer for, because what you're talking about are field effects, and it's probably in the answers of like the microtubules. And anyways, I won't go to that route. But what I can say is, let me describe it like this. So inside of people who are prone, not necessarily to being a full-blown alcoholic, but to drink most nights of the week, right? Or whatever. A lot of the times they have a suppression of their alpha waves. Either they're not formed correctly or they're not as high as they should be. So imagine sitting waves at the beach, right? They're just not as tall as they need to be, or they're broken up. They're not quite right. When we bring alpha into the way that they're supposed to have it, they no longer desire to drink because they have what they were looking for. Because alcohol doesn't make beautiful alpha, but it makes better alpha. It makes it bigger. It's not regulated correctly. It's not healthy alpha. But we actually need alpha to be at a certain level and at a certain timing in our brain.
Right.
And we need it all day long, not just when we have our eyes closed meditating. It's actually kind of like a page refresh on an internet browser at these alpha waves. So if people aren't getting it, they're really struggling. And it's not necessarily addiction. It's a brain wave timing and mechanism function issue. So if we just fix that, then they don't care about it anymore. And so there's, I'm sure, less attraction as well to the substance, like you were describing. I know that that exists as well. But this is, I think, a clear way to describe what we see. That's just one way to see it
So,
again and again.
yeah, and I've heard if we, well, not us so much because let's go back 1,000 years, hunter-gatherers, things like that. I've sort of read that the human eye would, like if someone was hungry and needing a nutrient in their body, that the human eye would attune and look in nature and help find that nutrient that the body needs. It would see it. It's like, Mum said, go and find the Easter eggs in the bushes. It's,
Right.
the brain's now like, there's a berry, there's a whatever,
Mm-hmm.
there's a
Mm-hmm.
mushroom, there's something, and that will give you the nutrient that you need. And I'm trying to remember where I was going with this now. So the person who's reaching to alcohol, their brain's telling them that is going to increase your alpha wave,
That's
maybe
right.
not to the best way it could be, but it is going to help, and that's why they're attracted to it. Is that
That's
something like
right.
that? Right.
That's right. And then they can feel awful and shameful and wish they could stop. And maybe now it's made them, some number of pounds or kilos heavy. And then now it's creating odd things in their relationships. What they don't know is it's also extremely toxic for the brain. So it's overall just bringing down their function. The level of alcohol that we should be consuming is basically zero for the brain health, just to make it super clear. But I don't say that to judge anybody that's currently drinking alcohol, because a lot of the times they're just wanting to bring their alpha up, and I support them bringing their alpha up. I think that's a very important thing that we should, encourage everybody to do, right? And I think another reason that we also might look to alcohol or some of these other things is to know how to de-stress, to know how to change gears. And so if we can learn how to do that internally, it's not a bad desire. It's not a bad desire to want to learn how to cut loose on the dance floor, right? But we don't have to get to alcohol for it. And it's okay if you're using that in the meantime, but what's the bridge to get to where we want to go with it? And how do we get that to happen? And I think there's a lot of paths there. I personally love the neurofeedback therapy that we've talked so much about, and as well as the strategy. There's also, let me say too, kind of while we're on this topic of just things that people can reach for. There's a practice that I teach, and it's a basic 3-step practice. It's very simple to learn, and this is a free download available on the website. And this practice has gotten people out of moments of hot spots, like where they're reaching for that thing or about to say the thing they know they shouldn't. But it's also made a huge difference, like again with the tarmac, where people have what they feel like is their first ever real meditation. And it's not necessarily a meditation recording, but it's a practice to work with the energetic structures of the body based on my capacities. So amongst other things, I'm a clairvoyant. And so I've watched how the energy anatomy actually functions. And I've noticed things that I haven't ever read in any books. And so this simple 3-step process brings people through something that brings them into the embodied experience of oneness, which is a very important difference than the thought of oneness.
Right.
And so it's something to reach for in a moment, and over the stretch of time is absolutely changes people's lives. And it's so simple, and I want to make it available to everyone for free. So please,
All right.
everybody, go
We'll have
have
that.
that.
We'll have that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Something I heard you talk about on another podcast just once was a particular brand of lion's mane
Oh,
mushroom
yeah.
drops.
From
Now,
Australia.
yeah, they happen to make it just down the road from where I live.
Oh,
And
great.
were you telling me months ago that you'd been to Australia
I have.
a
Yeah. I
long,
went
long time ago?
a
Yeah.
long time ago. Yeah. I'd love to go back.
Yeah, yeah. So, and this one's made in Byron Bay, and it's as the crow flies, it's very close to my house on the other side of the mountains. And I think you said you had it because when you have it, it does something with your dreaming or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
It's so
so
awesome that you actually live. By the way, I've never reached out to them. We just figured out that this works clinically. So it's not even like I have some affiliate kickback, or just so you
right,
guys, the listeners, and you all know, it's like, wow, this is amazing. I'm so glad you found that one. Yeah. So lion's mane really helps with the growth of new neural architecture. So new nerves and or connections. Mostly I think the research points to new connections. So that's huge, and it can be great for anytime we're in a period of learning, or we feel like we need some support with getting, like if we're doing something that we know is creating changes in our brain, when we changed our life in a huge way or whatever, can be a great thing to reach for. But additionally, this particular lion's mane has been shown to be very effective for increasing REM of sleep. And so what we know is that when we prescribe it for folks, they often immediately feel like they're sleeping better. Not everybody, but most people do feel like they get an immediate improvement in their sleep, but they have ability to have more dream recall. And probably because they're spending more time in REM, and there are other things going on that we don't have all the data to prove yet, but it's just lion's mane mushroom, so we'll just go for it, right? This health tonic is somehow helping us to probably have more dreams and or remember them better, and we see that all the time. And it's often with the very first dose. And some folks have to say, "Oh, I'll only do it every other night," because the dreams are more intense than they would like. So, and that's awesome because I remember I've been to Byron Bay. It's beautiful there. I love
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. So and because I heard you talk about this on the other podcast, and I'm one of these people. I think I'm at an extreme of
Mhm.
someone who does not remember their dreams.
Oh, got it.
Like I've I had a crazy dream about 8 years ago, and I can still tell you about that one. But
Hmm.
there's so few and far between. My grandson yesterday picked him up from karate. He's 7, and he's because it's summer break here in Australia at the moment, so we've got him for a few days. And on the way home, he's telling me, like, Grandpa, what's your worst nightmare that you ever had? And like, bad dream. And I'm like, oh, I don't remember. I just don't. And he's telling me all about all these different dreams. So anyway, I bought some of that, and I had some, for a week or more. I had the dose it said on the bottle.
Hmm.
Nothing. And
Oh, bummer.
my youngest son comes along, and he sees it in the pantry, and he's like, "Oh, wow, where'd you get this, Dad?" And because he does social media marketing for different companies, and a company he used to work for had the contract for that company
Oh, wow.
to
Yeah.
do it. So they got
Yeah.
sent all the samples. So he said, "Oh, we used to throw this stuff down all the time,
Yeah.
like that because they weren't paying for it. They were like triple dosing or whatever, you know."
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he loved it. He just ripped it out of the cupboard and whoosh, had a
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I said to him, I said, I listened to this lady and she said it was going to help, remember my dreams and all this sort of stuff. And I said, it hasn't helped at all. And he goes, oh, no. He said, well, just take double the dose. It's not going to hurt. And I'm a bit of a Scrooge. I always like stick to the whatever it says. And so, yeah, I tried a double dose a couple of times, but for me, I'm
Still
just one
no.
of those, yeah, and I just like, oh, okay. And years ago, that used to bother me, things like that I wasn't
Hmm.
good enough, it didn't work for me. But when we first started, and I told you about the other example of the extreme thing and the wonderful business thing that happened for me, since things like that have happened, I'm like, Yeah, well, you can't have everything amazing happen. You can't be an Olympic athlete in every sport there is on the planet. Like no one's. So it's like, yeah, I'll just be happy with what works for me. And I tried that stuff, but yeah,
Well, it may make a difference if you do it for a longer period of time. For a lot of health supplements, it's easy to double a dose and not have too much. And some of them, it's not safe, but with lion's mane, it's probably safe for most people. And the other thing is that there's a lot more that goes into it, right? So like if you think of again of the car analogy, and you drive the car into the mechanic and you say it's making a weird sound, and you try to describe the sound, he's actually got to have a look under the hood and do some troubleshooting to know what the real problem is. He might have a hunch, or he might have a thing that if he did, hey, that'll fix it 70% of the time. But yeah, so there's, again, coming back to alpha, if the alpha is not formed correctly or the timing isn't correct, then the bridge of remembering dreams is not as strong. So it could be not that the REM isn't as beautiful as it could be, but more of an alpha bridge thing. We're just really complex, far more complex than the most complex car or any other
yeah.
kind of equipment that's out there. So
So
I'm
we
sorry
need.
that it hasn't
That's
worked
okay.
yet, but it might.
Yeah. So we need alpha, do we? So I should have
Yeah.
like half a dozen beers just before bed.
I think that takes you the other way for remembering the dreams.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's the wrong type of alpha. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll get it all one day. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just going to flick to because I know I had another question I really wanted to ask you here. I've got down here, how do we stay in our lane and stop looking outside ourselves, always looking for more when we have evolved? And I'm like, so what you're talking about is extreme evolving to me. Like that's how I'm
Hmm.
looking at it, at an extreme. But do you think we ever get to a point where we have fully evolved and we need to be content with where we are? I mean, and everyone's come here in this incarnation that they're in for different reasons for whatever, and that's very hugely different. Do you think we ever get to the point where we need to back off and chill out, or should we be constantly wanting to attend 5-day sessions at your place? Where we want to do stuff like that, like what you offer and what other people offer once a month. Like or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Doug. And I think that it's really important to not come at it from a place of there's something wrong and I have to fix it and I'm not good enough. A lot of the times what's running the personal development or spiritual development, professional development is actually fear, right? It's disguised as improvement, but it's not lovable or one of the basics like that. So I recommend pivoting away from that. But also then I also don't necessarily recommend kind of just dropping back and being okay with where we're at entirely. But what I mean by that or the reason that I would say that is because within the brain, we actually want to be continuously learning in order to keep the roads and the thoroughfares open. If we're not engaged in a certain amount of learning, if the challenge level for life isn't enough, we basically fall asleep at the wheel. Neurologically, we start to decline. So you'll see this, for instance, like when a lot of guys go to retire, then or anybody who goes to retire, they might then suddenly kind of feel like their brain went to mush. And so they have to stay engaged with life in a really deep way, not necessarily busy, but they have to have depth of engagement, or else we see a decline. So I'm not a fan of anybody going into decline, but I also don't want them to push and whip themselves into have to do better, more, more, more. So I feel like a great strategy for this would be a place of wonder, a place of, I wonder how much more fun we could be having. I wonder what's underneath, this rock or underneath behind that bush, kind of to go back to that analogy, right? And desiring to be in a place of continual evolution, knowing that there isn't a destination. There's nothing to win or lose at either, but there's a fun adventure to be had. And so I think that can help to alleviate a lot of the pressure that's there for folks, where we've kind of taken this performance thing the wrong way, maybe, or too far. and have it be that we're having a really light and easeful and fun time of it, while also maybe getting the very best of results. I want to take it a step further and anchor that in. When we're watching people's brains learn in real time in our laboratory here, in our retreat center, we know that if their attitude goes towards, whatever, it's not going to work, or, oh, I'm probably not doing this right, we see a massive plummet in their moment by moment, milliseconds by milliseconds performance. And it's okay. We can all have that kind of wander through. That's not a problem. But what happens when we just change the thread to, oh, look at that. Oh, brain's doing well. Wow, this is fabulous. I'm having a great time. Wonder what's going to happen next. Then the performance just goes, it's so easeful, right? The person's actually having more fun. And so this is a lot of how, again, I can take all the theories that I want as a doctor of Chinese medicine, or as an executive coach, or, as a teacher of so many things. But where the rubber meets the road is like, does that actually work when we apply it to business? Or in this case, does that actually work when we apply it to the brain? And if it exists there, then I believe that to be it's a solid way of being. It reinforces a philosophy and a strategy that we probably should be following, because we can't outsmart what our neurons are doing, right? We can work with them, but turns out we're not smarter than our body. We're not smarter than kind of the forces of the power that be. It's like, just here we are. Let's live in harmony and amplify what we are to the fullest.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So just bringing us back to what the podcast's about, men and intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Any final advice for men on some simple basic steps to help start their intuitive journey, or to help continue it along? Any thoughts?
Yeah, gosh, I love teaching on intuition. So there's so much that I could say here. Maybe I'll just take a couple. I would say just being so anchored into our own bodies, taking really good care of our bodies, and spending really how we address neurologically and energetically, however we put the biggest emphasis, whatever we put the biggest emphasis into is really what we prioritize in learning. So if we want our brains to learn to be more intuitive, the first thing that we do in the day should not be look at our phone and take in external data. I know that we're on a podcast right now, so I appreciate that, but it's like, be careful how much external information we're taking in by comparison to the internal information that we're resourcing. Right. So I call it a balancing of inputs and outputs. Of course, we want to take in other information, but if we're doing that all the time, if every walk we take is always, we don't ever drive anywhere, we don't ever take a shower without hearing somebody talking, then there's no space for that voice within to come forward. So carving out that time, I think, is going to be a really important thing, and making sure that we create the ability, a bridge of some kind, whether it's just put your pen in your other hand and write into a paper journal, the basics like that. But we lose track of that in kind of inside of an academic pursuit or an intellectual pursuit. And I would say the other thing would be kind of like what you did. I know that was a huge one, and it was a jumping off of a cliff, but we all have micro cliffs we can jump off of every day that are based on intuitive nudges, and just take the chance. Say the thing out loud, turn the car that way, to see, go to the store then instead of later, or whatever it is. Just take these tiny changes and be brave and courageous enough to do that, and then just see how it feels, and address more into the felt state of reality than the thinking and logical state of reality in little micro movements, which builds trust, right? Ultimately, intuition is a game of trust. We've been conditioned to be afraid of it, or afraid that we don't have it, or that we're insufficient in some way with it. And we can build that trust just like we build it with another person, but this person is our highest self. It's our parietal lobe of our brain. It's our wise elder aspect, right? It's these things that actually go beyond what we think we are, and what are more of what we actually are, which is timeless soul on an endless journey, capable of everything. Walking miracle. We are a miracle in every moment. So just kind of building on that, kind of like what your boys have told you. If that thing could happen, then why not believe in this next thing, right? Like, Or if you could hear that thing, why not believe you could hear the next thing or know the next thing, however it came to you? And so just building, we have to, if we want something to be solid and strong and real, we have to commit to it in that regard. And it doesn't mean like, the self-flagellation and it's got to be a struggle, but we have to want it. We have to desire it, and then we have to show up for it. And then when good things happen inside of intuitive spaces, it's best we throw a small party. Look at that. It's so amazing. It could be the smallest thing that actually changes the reward structure in the brain, and it reinforces the learning in a really important way that can't be bypassed. So we definitely want to not just reach for it and live into it and make those courageous small movements toward it, but also be really excited when we get any kind of feedback at all that's for the positive, and just continue to encourage ourselves if we didn't feel like we got an answer, or if it didn't go the way we wanted. It's okay. Keep going. Just like you'd encourage a child to learn, we have to encourage ourselves in that way.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. Very good answer. Very, yeah. So before we wind up, I'm going to have all your contact info for people to look you up and things in the show notes. Is there any, like, because I've been pretty good at asking questions, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention or bring out that I haven't asked?
One little almost logistical thing is that as I talk about supplements, it's really important people understand I'm not giving any medical advice, because I don't know the listeners and I don't know what's safe for them or what's right for them. So just wanted to say that. Please consult with somebody. I think that it's so important. And the one thing I would like to make sure that's on a deeper level is said is more about what I was just speaking about. We are literally miraculous, and we have been trained and conditioned to think that we are less than that. So the feeling of, broken or not good enough or not lovable is the furthest thing from the truth, when we're actually that walking miracle that's got infinite capacity. If you think about what's happening inside of our body, but also what we're capable of connecting out into, right? So inside of the experience of oneness, not just the intellectual construct, but the experience of oneness, we have the infinite support. We have nourishment, we have guidance, we have the wisdom that's there that we really want. And really everything that we need is just right there. And so to remember that, it can be quite a game, because there's so many distractions and ways that we can be losing the plot. But coming back to that again and again and again for moments at a time, and we string those moments together into minutes, and then we forget and we come back. And over time, it becomes that we live our lives in a very, very different way. And that this process actually works a lot like compounding interest financially. In the beginning, the investment seems small and it's frustrating, but over time it grows. And our intuitive capacity and our spiritual capacities are much the same. So continuing to invest and continuing to believe in and harness that infinite power that is our birthright to be in access to, and to live in community and support, and and to nurture each other in that is I think it's the most rewarding thing. It's our spirituality or our intuition are not a pie slice on that chart. You remember the pie chart that we've been taught is our life? Like, here's the family slice, and it's like, no, spirituality and our sense of self is the whole pie. It creates the entire reality. It opens up all of the possibilities and permutations, including the ones that you didn't even know that you believed in or were possible, the ones that you can't perceive. So continuing to live into that space is the thing that I want to leave everybody with.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. I've been looking forward to this day since 4 months ago, since we had a chat for half an hour. Yeah, thank you so much. There's so many gold nuggets there for the men who are listening. And I'm sure there's the odd lady here or there listens in as well. And I've had some ladies come on and comment and go, "Oh, I've told my husband all about your podcast. Because and I was like, well, just tell them gently,
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Doug. It's been an amazing conversation, and I'm so happy to be here with you today and to talk to all the men. And big love to all of you. And it's not an easy thing being a man in today's world, and I just encourage everybody to feel that nurturing and to have that patience for yourself, because I can guarantee not only you, but that your listeners are really creating a new path, and men need that. All of the men really need that, and the women need it of the men, but men really need this kind of conversation and dropping in these ways. So thank you for showing up for that and for being you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Amy.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.